911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here.
intubated.
Send additional
Protesters are
trucks.
outside of City Hall, and they are not complying with our
Out
orders
on
to
one. Hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is Lifeline. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Lifeline 911 podcast with your host, Erica.
Hi.
I'm your co-host, Gary, and today we are going to be discussing passive versus active dispatching. So, passive versus active dispatching is something I've always said in terms of the two different types of dispatchers that you can have in an emergency call center. So, I've always kind of thought of it as passive dispatchers view themselves more as secretaries to the officers in the field, taking notes, doing what they're asked, and assigning officers to the calls they want to go on to. Whereas the active dispatchers are not secretaries; they're dispatchers, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
They're telling units, okay, you need to go here. Okay, I'm pulling you off of this call to go here, and so forth. So, what I suppose are some of the key factors that you would say make a dispatcher either active or passive?
I would say for the passive one, it's not an insult. I want to make sure that I put that out there because it's more, I think the passive dispatcher is more, oftentimes it's relatively new. Mm-hmm. They are unfamiliar with the level of authority that they have, and by authority, I don't mean authority over the officers, but I think that they are not completely in tune with their role and a certain level of authority that comes with that. Mm-hmm. I like to say often the officer is signed up to go and you signed up to send them. Right. So it is what is required. So I think when they are new, they don't have a full understanding of what their job is. They think it's, they get all kinds of information. They get officer safety, which is absolutely true. But another part of the job is to make sure that the citizenry gets the help that it needs. And there's a reason why we have dispatchers, because if it were just okay not to have someone actively participate in that, then we would just have AI do it.
Yeah, and, one day we may get there, but that day is not today.
It is not today.
And I would just also like to, kind of reinforce that idea. It's not necessarily that passive dispatchers are bad dispatchers or that they're lazy dispatchers. Right. I think from my having seen it, it's more a lack of confidence in the dispatcher.
Agreed.
Now, confidence, you walk a fine line with that. You don't want to be arrogant.
Agreed.
But, you can be a confident dispatcher, telling officers, you're going here, you're going there, to make sure that the officers, number one, are safe, and number two, the calls for service are being answered in a timely manner.
And efficiently, as efficient as possible.
Right. And the most of the time when I see someone who I kind of call like a passive dispatcher, it's going to be, as you said, kind of a new person who's maybe not so sure of themselves, of what their job is, because they're trying to remember all of these things. Okay, I need to dispatch on these calls in this amount of time. I need to log this. This is how I need to run this. This is how I need to confirm. A lot of information is pumping around your head as a brand new, baby dispatcher.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you kind of don't focus on is actually just what the word dispatch means.
Funny, you should bring that up, Gary.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I remember during my time as a CTO, I would often encounter baby dispatchers in training, and I would say, send this one and this one on the call. And they would hesitate and they would look at me as if I am just the meanest person. Why would you tell a police officer what to do? And I'm like, no, that's not what this is. You are a dispatcher. Do you understand what that means? And they would look at me with that blank look on their face, and I would look up the definition of it. And it is to send someone somewhere for a purpose.
Okay.
That's the job. So when you break that down, and I would break it down for them, I would say your job is to look at the calls that are in your queue and send the only person with the authority to go handle that call. You have to send them.
Yeah. And
You and I cannot go. Mm-hmm. So who of this whole team can actually go? And that's our job. So it's not arrogant. Mm-hmm. It's not bullying. It's not disrespectful in any way. Because remember, they signed up to go. You signed up to send them.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many, protocols and procedures built in. So, I think in any agency anywhere, you'll either have officers be in service or out of service. Like they could be eating lunch, writing a report, using the can, anything.
Yeah.
And if they're out of service, I'm not going to send them to anything.
Right.
But if you're in service, that means you are available to go take a call.
Absolutely.
And it's not belittling to them or
Agreed.
mean to them to
Thank
say,
you.
I need you to say, go out to, such and such address for a noise complaint.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for. And I think a lot of times the number one issue I think that newly minted dispatchers have is the confidence to talk on the radio.
Okay.
Like, it's almost like they're scared to kind of key up. But
Yeah.
the number two issue is probably keying up to dispatch an officer somewhere.
Yeah.
And as you said, they don't want to feel like they're, imposing on the cop.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Because, like, if you ever watch any, like, movie or TV show, like, Adam 12 or like, NYPD
Grace.
Blue. Yeah.
Or Grace on 911 Austin, Lone Star.
Yeah.
Grace does not hesitate.
No, yeah. And it's not being mean. It's just, I have a call that needs to be handled. You're available to go handle it. Go do it.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's get it done.
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with, telling the officer what to do or where to go.
Yeah.
That you as the dispatcher sitting in that seat have the best bird's eye view of that part of town or whatever
Yes.
you're dispatching on.
Yep.
Because, the cops out there on the street, they've got some idea of where everybody is, but like,
It's
they're
not the same.
Yeah.
The perspective is different.
Yeah, they're dealing with the stuff. You get to sit here as a dispatcher from a 30,000 foot view and see.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what I need,
Yeah.
and there's no reason for that hesitation.
No, it is. Don't get me wrong. We were both newly minted dispatchers, and I remember the feeling. I remember that feeling because you're not as confident. You are somehow worried that you're going to misstep. Also, I think that's where that confidence or the lack thereof comes from. You're not confident that that this is the right thing to do. Especially when it comes to preempting off of for this, especially I think I find when they are faced with preempting a unit to go from or taking a unit off one call and sending him or her to something else, when they have not initiated that swap,
Yeah.
they feel as though it's almost like asking themselves, do I really have the authority to make this call? And the answer is yes, you do.
Yeah, and the thing is especially if you ask those new dispatchers, like, what does a really good dispatcher look like? They're going to point to someone who is an active dispatcher.
Absolutely.
Because I don't want to use an example of anyone who I may currently work with. I used to work with this girl named Kat, and she was a great dispatcher.
Legend.
And like, she would have no hesitation or waiting to be like, Adam 101, premium team from that call, start for this check welfare at blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Adam 102, you're going to 75, you're going to back up whatever Adam 101 was doing, and just kind of move the pieces around the board.
Yes.
Because that is your job, to efficiently get them where they need to be. Because even though, you might have two units that are friends and they like to go on calls, they might be on opposite sides of town.
And you're right, because and in that moment, your job as the dispatcher is not to make sure that they are able to go to the call together, because that's not what serves the purpose of what we're here for. Because if the call needs an officer, it needs it right now. You've got one that's really close or another that's close, and this one is halfway across town. It makes no sense to allow all of these lines on your screen to be drawn from opposite ends of the city, and they're crisscrossing, and there's absolutely no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah. I mean, you make these choices every day in your life. You're like, I've got, 4 errands to run. You're not going to pick errand A that's across town from errand B that you want to do across town from C. You're going to go, what's the shortest route to get to all of these?
Yeah, and even if that means and you may be able to do that in your home life, you may choose to go to the farthest one so you can work your way back home.
Sure.
You might do that, but there's a method to your madness there. You have a thought process in why you're doing it. It's not all haphazard. And we find that passive, less experienced dispatch, because I think that's a better way to put it. Passive often equals less experience, and so thereby less confidence, and so that's why they dispatch in this manner. They are. I don't think it's lack of caring at all.
Yeah, I mean, complacency is a whole other issue.
That's his own thing. And I'm going to say it again because one day we're going to do this episode of complacency and lazy are not the same thing. They are completely separate.
Yeah, and as I kind of alluded to at the start, a passive dispatcher I always kind of look at as more of almost a secretary for the officers. It's somebody who's might be really diligent in keeping notes. So the officer's like, run a return for me, put it in the call, get me a record started. These are all things they do very well.
Yeah.
But they're not actively making decisions a lot of the times.
Yes, that is so much better. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to say all this time. And
we work it out in real time here, folks.
Exactly.
This isn't scripted.
No, it isn't. I can promise you it is not. But yes, I think that's it exactly. The decision making is what is missing in a passive dispatcher, because they are, I like to also say that the radio is almost working itself, or the officers are working the radio and the dispatcher just hanging on for dear life. They're just gritting their teeth and just holding on. And they're waiting for the officers to tell them what is next. Whereas an active dispatcher is looking at the board going, this is what's next. And you guys strap in, because here we go.
Yeah, and it's also much more stressful as a dispatcher to be waiting for what's next rather than deciding what's next.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, there's always, we work in emergency communications. There's always going to be something that pops up that, you didn't decide to be next. But, if you're controlling, I don't want to say controlling, if you're managing the resources you have to go out to handle the calls that are coming in, you get to set the pace and be on top of that. And that, I think, is what an active dispatcher does really well. And they'll appear, and they will be much more calm on the radio. They'll be reading their newspaper. They'll be chilling out. Whereas, and they'll have 24 calls on their screen that are all being worked. Whereas you'll have a passive dispatcher who's just stressing out and just shaking, waiting for the next thing to happen. And they've got 2 calls on their screen, and they're just sweating bullets.
And they're wondering, about, for us in our center, I take that back. I think that there's not a center anywhere that endorses calls holding for no apparent reason.
No.
Now, when you have a passive dispatcher, oftentimes the calls will sit there
Yeah.
waiting for the officers to make themselves available to go to it. Or even if they are available, the passive dispatcher is waiting for them to assign to it, and then they go.
And it may be because, you as the dispatcher don't want to make them feel bad or like offend them. But like, I guarantee you that it is not only way worse for you as the dispatcher, it's way worse for those officers in the field because they're sitting around being like, I see that noise complaint over there at old Miss Leary's house.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go to it. Somebody will sign up for it eventually, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it'll hold and never get taken care of. And then everybody's just got sort of Damocles over their head to who's going to go to this call. Whereas the active dispatcher, you'll look at the map. Okay. Unit 501 is the closest. You're going to the call.
Yep.
And that
Somebody's
easy.
going.
Yeah.
Because Mrs. O'Leary, did you call her?
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Leary does not deserve to sit and wait for us to play hot potato with the responsibility of who's going to go.
Yeah. And it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. Like,
Yeah, let's just go.
yeah, just take care of it and move on. And I guarantee you,
It gets easier.
it does get easier. And the units that you work with will respect you a lot more.
There you go.
And it only takes about 1 minute for the officers to decide, is this dispatcher active or passive?
I promise you. And whether you realize it or not, they can tell you
Yes.
which one you are.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know, and they know that you don't know which one you are. Because when you know, and this is not to brag, but it's true. You and I, you just worked the radio, last week or the week before?
Yeah. I think it
And
was
you
last week.
spent a couple of hours on the channel. And I can promise you, just because I know you as a dispatcher and a supervisor, I don't know if it was a different experience, but I do know there was no question as to which one you were
Yeah.
for that period of time. And I just sat down this past week and twice, as a matter of fact, for about a total of 8 hours over the course of this week, which doesn't happen that much as supervisors because that's just not the job we do anymore.
Yep.
But we try to get in there and keep, dust the cobwebs off.
It is a
from time to time.
perishable skill.
It absolutely, I can promise you that. But when I sat down, it took me about a minute to go, oh, okay, I remember now. Let's go.
Yeah.
You and you. Let's see, I have 2 cops and I have a call.
I could put
Let me
these together.
see, which one should it be? Oh, wait,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it just and also is kind of a little secret to those on the fence about whether they should be passive or active dispatchers. It'll make your life a lot easier
I promise.
because, you won't have to wait for things to happen. You'll be taking care of it.
Yeah.
No reason to procrastinate on this. The officers know that when they put themselves back in service, that they're ready to go to a call.
Yep.
And as we said, they will determine very quickly when you start working the radio if they know that's going to be sending them to a call or if it's going to be we're waiting around until someone finally picks up Mrs. O'Leary's call.
Yeah. And it's so funny because now the other side to that is not so much the officers, but then depending on what the circumstances are, you have 2 people like Gary and myself who are watching because that's what we do. And we are not so much looking for an opportunity to chastise, but we are often looking at our baby dispatchers and are going, okay, we have some passivity going here. Let's see if we can't nudge this along. And we want to help them when we find that situation, but we also know that it's up to them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as a supervisor, I want to do as little work as possible.
That is not true, Gary.
And to make that happen, I need to have the best team that knows what they're doing and taking care of business.
But we have no problem with coaching and grooming also.
Right. So, my goal is to get every, dispatcher in this case and call taker to be independent, confident in themselves so they don't need me.
True.
is kind of the
That's a good
tact
point.
I was
Yeah,
taking with
yeah,
that.
You're right.
Yeah, because once they're all running confident in themselves, I can just kind of monitor, make sure everything's going fine.
True.
And if, getting dispatchers to that point of taking care of the business that comes into their sector and monitoring it and keeping it tidy, then I don't have to jump on them for little things. And then we can focus on better things like, okay, let's send you to this, officer needs assistance training, or
Yeah.
send you to this, I don't know, FEMA training or something. We can focus on things that are
FEMA training. That's fun.
yeah, ICS baby.
Nice.
We can send more fun stuff can happen once we don't have to just constantly focus on the basics.
True.
And like an active dispatcher helps that along.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah. So how to fix the problem? If you feel like you are a passive dispatcher, how can you move into being a more active dispatcher and giving yourself, I suppose, the confidence to be able to do that? Time in the job is one thing.
Definitely, but I think also if you're wondering, listening to this, if you're wondering, am I what would be considered a passive dispatcher, I can pretty much tell you the answer is yes.
Yeah.
If you're wondering that, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because active dispatchers know that they're active dispatchers because that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are wondering about that and you've come to that conclusion, that's where your leadership can help you. That's where you look around the room and look at the seasoned or active, whatever that might be. Look at your
Sure.
leads, your supervisors, or your training team, and ask them for that help, the coaching, and the advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I can promise you, most people enjoy being asked their opinion.
Yes, they do.
It's true. And I tell you what, especially in this environment,
Mm-hmm.
if someone is relatively new and they are going to the more experienced, seasoned people in the room saying, hey, I see that you are really good at this. Can you give me some tips?
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Yeah.
They're going to be like,
absolutely.
pull up a chair. How
Mhm.
long do you have? Is what that would be. Because I know I'm long-winded when it comes to training. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but there's a lot of information that I can hand out on any given subject. So if you are wondering if you are that passive dispatcher and you're looking for a way to put some pep in your step, for lack of a better way, just look around. I'm sure there's someone.
Yeah. We've always said here that to really mint a dispatcher, to create a dispatcher, it takes 1.5 to 2 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, some of that is classroom training, some of that is on the job training, but the vast majority of that is after you've been cut loose, being on your own, just, getting wet behind the ears
Yeah.
and feeling comfortable in what you do, because it's very likely a very different job than any you've had before. It might be your first job.
Absolutely. It was unlike anything I had ever done.
Yeah.
And it was by far, in my opinion, the hardest that I'd ever done, but at the same time, the most rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing like it.
No, there certainly is not.
I cannot imagine going back out into the world looking for something else that will keep me engaged and keep me as fulfilled. I'm stumped.
Mm-hmm. No, it is definitely very engaging and fulfilling.
Yeah.
And as you kind of, build that confidence in your own abilities and knowledge of policy and procedure and just the daily things that you do, you should be striving towards moving to being an active dispatcher.
Yeah.
And you'll know, kind of going off what Erica had said earlier, you'll know you hit it when you no longer ask yourself, am I a passive or active dispatcher?
Yep, you will know.
Yeah.
You'll know the answer to that question without without hesitation.
Yeah. You will know that when you walk into that building, sit down at that radio console, no matter what is on that screen throughout the whole day,
Yes.
you're going to be okay.
That is so true, because so much of the stress and anxiety of being new is the worry that you're going to encounter something today that you have not seen before and you don't know what to do with it. Or that an officer is going to key up and they're going to say something that you don't know how to respond to. That's it. Whereas after you've been doing it a while, like us, I realize I'm, been doing it since God was a boy. There's a good chance someone will key up and say something, and you know what I'll say? I do not know, but I will find out.
Yeah. It's not a problem to say I don't know.
I promise you it's okay.
And to those that are, active dispatchers and have been doing this a while, one of the things I like to do is talk to the new people, because not only do you get refreshed on policy and procedure, and also a lot of times I learn things like power line, like
Yes.
commands in the system, or
Yes.
things like that little tips and tricks that can save a few steps, but it also helps them feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you, because
Yes.
you want your people, if you like run a radio, when you get up for break or lunch or take a vacation, you want the officers that you work with to have a good active dispatcher,
Yep. I agree.
to keep them safe, to keep the city safe,
Yep.
and to be successful.
And you're building a more confident colleague in the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is the sort of the key element. And once you feel like you've moved into sort of active dispatching, and confident in yourself, then you can start training others in how to do that.
Absolutely. That is the next thing. We've got to do a thing about that too,
About training?
about training.
Sure.
We got to do something about training, because I think with time, I think the natural progression is, after you've been doing this a while, you should at least try it. At least try it, because you might end up loving it, and you won't know that until you try it.
I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It's a lot of work, and
It's work.
It's very stressful, but it's also very, very rewarding.
It is.
So
Yeah.
that's my pitch today for training, I suppose.
That's the pitch.
It also-
now the juices are going for me. My brain is going.
And it'll also make you the best dispatcher you can be.
It is the truth, because if you think you're good by yourself, wait till you're responsible for teaching someone else. Because
Yeah.
if that doesn't keep you on your toes, you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think
Alrighty
that's
then.
all the time we have for active versus passive dispatching. So if you're out there in emergency communications land, do try and move into that more active, engaged role, because that, I think, is going to be success for your long-term career.
I agree.
We will see you guys next week. If you have any questions, please send them to lifeline911podcast@gmail.com, or find us online at our Facebook group, Lifeline Podcast. From all of us at Lifeline Podcast, I'm Gary,
I'm Erica.
and we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911 Podcast. If you have any questions about the topics we discussed today, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us your questions at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. Stay safe out there. Until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.